Well, but there's kind of. Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the April 17th Board Special Public Meeting to order. In the absence of Treasurer Wagner, who, with the Assistant Treasurer, I believe is in the conference in Columbus, I need a motion to nominate a board member by the name of Brandon Craig to serve as Treasurer Pro Tem. Do I have a motion? Thank you. And do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chairman Brandon Craig is elected to serve as Treasurer Pro Tem. Thank you, Mr. Craig. Would you please call the attendance roll?
Mr. Craig here. Mr. Lindy
Here.
Ms. Matt,
Here.
Dr. Moffitt, Mr. Morosky, Vice President Weinberg.
Here.
President Bolton.
Here, thank you. I will also now entertain a motion, if I could, to ask for a motion to accept the special public meeting agenda as presented. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
And Chairman Craig, does that require a roll call or is that a voice vote? Do you know?
She has it as a roll call, but
Okay, great. Would you do that
Yep.
again for us?
Mr. Craig, yes. Mr. Lindy,
It's funny.
yes. Ms. Matt,
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt, Vice President Weinberg,
Yes.
and President Bolton.
Yes. The agenda today, most important for the folks that are watching and participating, it's a special public only because it had not been on the original schedule. That's all that makes it special, besides just the presence of everybody here working. So we wanted to make sure that we know that. We have also in front of us old business and new business. And if we could, I'm going to kind of split up the old business and want to get to the new business and the superintendent's presentations as early as we can. And we also want to see if we can stay within that hard stop or even be better tonight if we can regarding the hard stop. To remind the audience as well, it is not on these Wednesday meetings, special public that are usually committee of the whole, there is not any hearing of the public. So just wanted to make sure we knew that. I'm going to go first to the superintendent regarding old business and number 4. Madam Superintendent, is there any update or information that you need to share? And if not, that's fine, regarding the negotiations and discussions with our 6 unions.
We do have some update. I'll ask our general counsel if he'll come forward. But in terms of the updates, we have gotten quite a bit of support already from all of our unions. I think we're waiting for official from just 1 or 2 more. And I think, and there's also clarity that as we're working through closing our budget gap, that we're also doing that with taking care of our employees in mind. And so we believe that really soon we will have our official other responses. And now I'll turn over to our counsel.
That's the update. The only, I think we would anticipate putting through approvals from the board on the meeting on the 29th.
On the 29th or the 6th.
Or the 6th,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, the superintendent, is the sixth the one that you thought we might have to have as a business, or is that a regular?
That's a
business?
regular business meeting.
Okay.
That's our first business meeting in May.
Great. So one of those 2 dates, and that would help us close out whatever of the members in the unions been voting, or
They have.
And we've received ratification votes from every union that has considered it so far that we've heard from. There's still one union
that's
that we're
good
waiting.
news.
Yep,
We'll take that. Thank you. Any other additional?
I think that's it.
that's it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Well, while the superintendent has the floor, we'll skip over some of this other old business that is also been up on board docs and was dealt with initially in our last meeting, but we'll go now, if it's okay, we will go to the superintendent's presentations.
Presentations?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Thank
So
you.
our first presentation is on the goals and guardrails. And the first one that we're covering is equitable resourcing. If we'll just, thank you. Next slide. So today we're covering equitable resourcing, which is guardrail 4 in the interims and guardrail 5 on chronic absenteeism. The next coverage would be for guardrail 2 in the interims, which is on discipline. Next slide. Next slide, please. So the guardrail covers or shares that the superintendent shall not propose or recommend the acquisition or distribution of resources that are unanalyzed, excuse me, or underrated for quality or the favorite status granted to local women or minority marketplace providers of goods or services. We were able to put both of these guardrails together so that we're able to review them at the same time. And I will share that this is the beginning of this process for us. So in terms of looking at where we are and how we're thinking through it. So the first one is the percent of suppliers meeting diversity criteria receiving RFP solicitations will increase from 46.2% in May of 2023 to 50% by May of 2025. And so this one is on track for us. We set the target at 50%, and currently we are at 50.1% in this area. And that's just how we're doing the solicitation to these specific areas in terms of our RFPs. The second is the percent of suppliers meeting diversity criteria on the approved vendor list will increase from 74.2% in May of 2023 to 80% in May of 2025. And we've actually exceeded this target as well. In the spring, we're currently at 87.5%. And so the target that we set there was 80%. So in both of these areas, both the RFP solicitations and looking at the diversity criteria for the approved vendor list, we've seen an increase in that focus, and we're on track in that space. I would share in terms of the notes, I would call this out, that the prior data is not available because it was all reported and tracked manually. So this is a baseline year for this information. We now have a resource that allows us to track that through technology, but we were not able to do that before. And in terms of the counts, there are some vendors that meet multiple diversity areas, and so they're counted for all of those areas that they meet as well. And for 4A, just to call out, we had 959 total vendors for the 2023-24 spring. 4B, we had 4,338 total vendors for the 2023-2024 for 4B. So 4A was 959 and 4B was 4,338. Next slide. In terms of next steps and takeaways, we want to continue to improve. We're seeing continued improvement with increasing the diversity of our supplier pool. Both of our interim guardrails currently exceed the target that we set for 24-25. In terms of next steps, we want to continue to review the awards by category and spend, with continuing to focus on the data and how we're looking at monitoring that data. We also want to enhance the plan to retain and expand current vendors, adjust RFP language to better align with the strategic plan, because as we're thinking about our vendors and we're thinking about working with them, we also want to do that in a way that work aligns to the work that we're doing through the strategic plan. And lastly, to update the website with a comprehensive process of becoming and remaining a vendor for the district. So there's some information, but there have been some concern that have been raised over the last year or so about the usability of the information that's there, the access to it. So we want to make sure that that gets updated as well. So I'll stop there and open for questions before going to the next guardrail.
Any members have questions or comments regarding? Oh, Chairman Craig.
I'll just make the quick comment, and I appreciate the hard work that's being done on this, and I know that part of the reason our old numbers were also difficult is that the method of us tracking some of the information used to also be manual. So how we verify whether or not somebody was a diverse supplier or a diverse vendor was not always accurate or consistent over time. And so that was something that I'm hoping as we put this into a more automated process, it will be something we can actually look at for years to come on a more consistent basis.
Thank you.
If I could ask Chairman Craig, that whole diversity and supplier diversity, is that going to be on finance, or when was it last on finance committee? I know I certainly shirked that responsibility when I was chair.
I know we've talked about it with regards to when we reviewed the contracts last time is one spot where we did look at it. And when we've looked at the review of all of the different agreements that we have in all the different places. I don't know we've ever done it on the vendor end. I know we've done it on who we have as a contract, but who's an approved vendor. I don't know that we've ever done that or looked at that list in any extensive way in our committee. It's something we can certainly add to the work that we are doing, budget and finance growth.
Other comments to that? Mr. Lindy.
Be very brief. I just think that this is exciting to see that we're tracking this and hitting our marks. We have a $600 million plus budget. We have a lot of buying power in Cincinnati. And I think it's just gratifying and encouraging to see us using that buying power in a way to create a better city. So thank you.
Dr. Moffitt.
So thank you for this information. I am always very interested in vendors and local vendors, having been one myself up until December 31st of 2021. I still get the emails around procurement and have helped other local vendors. Having said that, I'm really curious if we could even, as you all begin to roll out a new system and to update what you all are currently doing moving forward, if you could even disaggregate the data on vendors, local vendors per school, so that we could see, what schools are, where are we putting a lot of our local talent or local maybe contracts and vendors, or our majority of our vendors that are local doing X. It would be very interesting to see that data a little bit more disaggregated. So I'm looking forward to that, and definitely looking forward to that in budget. Where are we spending our local dollars, and who are we spending those local dollars with? So.
Thank you. I do believe that on the contract information that we have provided to the board, we have a breakdown on that document that shows whether or not the vendors are local, or if they're local, which of the diversity categories they also represent. So we can look back at that to see what additional information we'd be able to provide from that.
I think I just want to clarify. I'm looking at where all of what you provide now is great. I'm looking for where those contracts are going. So are they going to high schools, the local contract? Like, I'm just looking for one more level down, not just that we have them, but and maybe what their demographics are, but where is that money being spent? Is it being spent in capital? Is it being spent on the school? What is it? Is it being spent in professional development? It would be very interesting to me to take it one step further. So thank you.
Other questions? I think Superintendent's right from a standpoint of, if I recall, back in the audit committee, I think Chief of Operations produced that list. It might be, and I'm sure there's a newer list or a more recent list, but that was a few months ago. It might be great to be able to share the updated list, because it was very clear about the percentage of local vendors and what have you. And I think that was really helpful. As to your point, then it also played out as to, are they matching? Is it female owned, is minority owned, or what have you? But it might be good to see that new updated list emphasizing the local vendors.
We can do that. And as well, on the individual contract list, where the contract is coming from is on that document as well. So if it's at a school level, it says the name of the school, who the contract is. And so that's one of the reasons that when we share that, it's such a massive document, because all of that information is already there. But we can provide that again.
Yeah, and I think that's relevant because it is policy. We have said that we want to give those additional points, much as we might do for veterans or do for minority owned or what have you. We do have as a policy an interest in spending those dollars as best we can locally when we can. So that'd be, I think, very useful if we'd have that updated list. I know it's been done. I appreciate it when it was produced back for audit committee a few months ago. Any last questions about this one before go ahead?
Okay, thank you. We'll go to the next. This is our guardrail 5 on chronic absenteeism. Next slide. Chronic absenteeism is when a student misses 10% or more days in the school year. And so want to call out that changes each day or that we have school, right? So it's 10% of the time that's there. So for Q3, that would be 4.4 days. So the cumulative number of days would be 12.4. So a student would be considered chronically absent if they've missed more than 12.4 days. Next slide. And we do, if you'll go back to the last slide, we also want to call this slide out as well, and we'll see, it'll look a little different next year because if you recall from the calendar, we organized the days a bit more, so there were more of the days were more equitable across the board, but it changes a little bit because you see we do have additional days in the fourth quarter, and that takes some consideration in terms of testing. Next slide. So the percent of K-12 students with chronic absenteeism will decrease from 45.9% in May of 2023 to 36% in May of 2025. We are currently on track with this guardrail. It is still a really high number. And so I do want to call out that we are not satisfied in this space, but we are pleased to see that the data is going down, which essentially means more students are in school. We had a 2% change from our Q3 in 2022-2023, and where we are now, we're at 41%, and our target overall is 36% for the end of this school year. Next slide. Specifically looking at our Black students that are chronically absent, will decrease from 53.2% in May of 2023 to 39.2% in May of 2025. The slide itself is green. However, we are not on track on this particular target because we're not showing an overall. We showed a slight decline. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Off is wrong. We are on track. I'm thinking, no, we said that we would consistently, if there was a decrease, we would make sure that was on track. So we will correct that so that it's correct for the record, but we are on track in this area as well. And we did have a slight decrease for our Black students. Next slide. The same for our Hispanic students. And this is one that you'll see in the celebrations in the very end. And I do think this also speaks to the additional support of the ELL coordinators in our schools that have a larger population of ELL students. But in Q3 for last year, we were at 45%. We've had a 6.2% change for our ELL students. So we are definitely on track in this area and want to applaud that focus. Next slide. So chronic absenteeism for our high schools with an AP of culture and community and attendance social worker. So we did call this information out in terms of looking at where we were and where the changes were so that you were able to see that information by school. In the information that you have, the data for all schools can be seen at the link. So if we click the link, we'll be able to see all the schools as well. Next slide. Chronic absenteeism for schools without an AP of culture. And I do want to make sure that we recognize the schools that we're looking at, as I shared before. So on the previous slide, we're including more of our schools that are comprehensive high schools. On this particular slide, this is more of our specialty programs. And so we do see where those differences show up in this space. Next slide. Takeaways and next steps. So chronic absenteeism is improving across all student groups from Q3 last year to Q3 this year, which is a plus. Our biggest improvement is as I shared earlier, is with our Hispanic students. Our 10 high schools show improvement from 10 of our high schools show improvement from quarter 3 last year to quarter 3 this year, which is a huge celebration as well. Our next steps would be to continue to push our work with our social workers around chronic absenteeism into quarter 4, continue educating our families on the importance of attending partial days, even and finishing the year strong. So even if a student has to be picked up early, because we know that the state does calculate based on hours and time, we want to make sure that they're able to spend as much time in school as possible. We're continuing to close monitor. We have a new resource. We've gotten very good responses from it from earlier. We really just started working with this, so we're looking for the overall impact, but the close monitoring of all here and the impact and the reports that go along with that. And that's where our students are getting immediate responses. There are some that are having, there was one person that shared that they have a concern with the chat box, but where we are with AI is the way of the world. And so that's one of the things that parents are responding to, because as parents begin to ask questions, it also routes them to where they're able to get those answers. And so that's something that's been very positive. Improved tracking and reporting of truancy to the courts. This is something that has also been a celebration, because and I think I shared this earlier, but when I met with the juvenile judge this summer, one of the concerns was that previously we were waiting until the end of the year to submit the information to the courts, and the courts could not do anything with that information. And so our director of positive school culture has really they've been meeting monthly with the social workers. They've been completing that information. And so the goal for that is just to make sure that there is partnership with the families so that we're getting more students to school in terms of an intervention. So that's the reason that that's positive. I think that's the last slide, so I'll stop here for questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments regarding this particular presentation? Mr. Craig?
So two things. I want to first kind of highlight some of the schools that were showing a dramatic drop. So, again, Dater dropping nearly 12 points, Withrow dropping 7 points for the F&C rates is tremendous. I mean, I think that's, again, a great sign. Similarly, the newly titled Gilligan Digital Academy dropping 7 points, and Lighthouse dropping 20 points from where they were. The one worry, and again, this is the number that we've kind of seen has been a high number for a while, is the virtual, and it seems to be going up as opposed to going down. And I worry in some ways is that because of the nature of how the program operates, the ability to monitor and see where students are while participating in the program seems to be.
That's one of the areas that we actually talked about quite a bit as well. Really digging in a bit more there in terms of virtual high school, because the students, they have to have so many engagements throughout the week, and in order for them to be counted. So there's the daily engagement, there is the time that they're able to do asynchronous work, and then there's the weekly engagement with them as well. And so for many of the students, we're finding that it is truly hit or miss for them. And that is one of the concerns, honestly, from the principal, because if they can't be counted as attending if they're not attending, and them getting the credit for the class, even if they're doing it on their own, makes it more challenging as well.
And I think the other kind of thought process I have with regards to this is that I know we talk about high school absenteeism with chronic absenteeism because we think about it from the students themselves getting in and out. But I do know that we have some of our elementary schools that do have some of these same issues. And I'm just wondering if there's any thoughts around, because those issues are not necessarily, I think even we talked about it, we were doing our goals and guardrails, that we don't necessarily, the third grader is not going to go skip school on their own, right? We generally don't see this as being their thing. And so how are we having those conversations, or we are highlighting those areas where we're seeing that may be a problem? I think you've already spoke about the ELL for Hispanic students, but are there other resources we're looking into?
Yes, so if you'll click the blue link here where it says data for all schools can be seen here. That is one of the reasons that I lift the work of the social workers and reporting that information to the courts. Because to your point, there has to be a different type of intervention for the younger children because they're not responsible for getting themselves to school. So when we open up and we look at the overall data for this one, and it's easier to see here. We were able to track it from year to year. If you'll scroll all the way down to, scroll across so we can look at this year. Thank you. And just up a little bit so we'll see the date. Thank you. So when we look in this particular space, we're able to see where we are specifically in terms of the percentages and the percentages of students. And then the social workers are working with the attendant social worker at the school, and then the attendance intervention team meetings with the family. So trying to do that proactively before it gets to the point of directing it to the courts.
Thank you, President Bolden. And thank you, Superintendent. I had just one comment and one question. The comment was, I feel a little bit like a broken record on this, but just to contrast how different this feels than some of the committee of the whole meetings when I joined the board 5 years ago. Back then, we actually were having full business meetings on Wednesdays and not committees of the whole. But to have a small number of most important outcomes that have to do with children, where we've set targets in advance that would represent meaningful improvement. And then we're watching as a board to check to see whether the system is improving or not, is really a very, very, very different environment than the board that I joined 5 years ago. And I just want to say that because I think that's such good, important work. And it's because of everybody sitting at this table and the people who help make this meeting happen and our teachers in the schools every day. So it's really remarkable. And I just want to say thank you. And particularly on chronic absenteeism, I feel the same way about this as I do about transportation. You know, if we can't get the kids in school, you know, we can't do the important work that has to happen. So I think this is a great thing to look at. My question was, I'm really glad to see that the numbers are improving from last year. I think there were pieces of this that I picked up from the presentation, but if you just had to name the one or two things that you think are driving the improvement, like what's the story behind why it's better now than it was last year?
So I think there are a few different things. I think one, the work of the social workers has always been to visit the homes and go and do home visits. But I think the way that we really started to monitor and track that, and the frequency with which they are reviewing the data has been positive, and it's also been rewarding for them. As they come together monthly in their huddle conversations, they're able to also talk across schools about what seems to be working well in their buildings and where they are seeing improvement. So I think that that's one. I think the second is that we are looking to address the concern from all angles. So I do believe that as we're working with teachers, there is, you know, the continued reminders that students are expected to be in school. I think there's been more work at the school level as we talk about educating parents, that sometimes parents just don't realize that those numbers add up and that the student will be chronically absent. And so when you begin to have the conversation with families that when students are chronically absent, that means that essentially they've missed a month of school, that's something that makes sense to them. So I think that renewed focus around that. Those would be three areas that I believe are really offering assistance in that space. I think where we're going next in this space will also be helpful because we are connecting with Stay in the Game, which you may be familiar with because I think they initially started in Cleveland, but partner with that through the Bengals and working with that. And the second thing with that is we are working to really start a citywide campaign. There's been a lot of interest in terms of conversations around it, around attendance across the board. Because whether students are attending CPS, all students in Cincinnati don't attend CPS, but all students are expected to be in school. So we do believe that it's something that the entire city can actually take some ownership in. And so that's another step that we believe that will be positive as we begin to move forward.
Other questions, comments, reflection?
Thank you. Superintendent, so based off of, if you go back to slide 7, where you're kind of giving the numbers regarding chronic absenteeism, are we seeing, how is this affecting like our students in terms of graduation rates? Some are having to do summer school and some are obviously recovery of courses that they are missing, because think if you have a student who is missing, how many days did you say would be considered chronic?
Right now, if they are over 12.5, 12.4.
So for example, if a student misses 30 days so far, they're up to 30 days. That's a lot of days. And so how is that reflecting in terms of for summer recovery, the need for that and things like that in terms of working towards graduation?
I don't know that we have actually looked at the attendance rate and the impact on grades right now. But I can just say kind of anecdotally that, of course, more, the more that students are, the average child, there are some students that can not go to class and they'll be fine and they'll catch up with the work and all of those things. But most students, that's not the case for them. And so we could anecdotally say that if students are absent and they're absent, they're chronically absent, that it is having an impact on them academically. I just don't know. I want to give concrete information if I'm giving that to you. And I can't say that we've gone back and looked at whether or not the students that are not being academically successful at this point, what the percentage of those students are that are also chronically absent.
That could be something to eventually look into, but I just had a question about that. Thank you.
Member Mapp?
Thank you, President Bolton. Superintendent Wright, thank you for this presentation. And I really want to elevate the work that has been done. I know that just within the schools, I know that there's the robocalls, there's the text messages. So I think that really helps to just remind families about the importance of being in school. So not only are we seeing it in the data, but we're seeing the action reflected as well. I did want to ask the question on page 8. So I'm noticing that as we're talking about the Black demographics as well as special education and our economically disadvantaged students, those percentages are higher. I'm wondering if we have identified some emerging themes that have been a point or a topic of discussion, or maybe there's some intersectionality that's impacting the chronic absenteeism rate.
I think that when we look historically at where those numbers have been, we're seeing a decline in the historical trend. So if we look back, say at 21-22, which would be the year after COVID, still very high. And again, I also echo that now is not where we want to be, but it's better than where we were. But when we look at the trends, the numbers have been high to start with. So I think that it goes back to some of the other indicators that we see across the board. I also think that, and this is something that we have looked at, I also think that it's important for us to look at how this data connects to discipline. Because as students are being disciplined, there's always the expectation that students are attending the Promise Center, but that they're actually attending the Promise Center and getting credit for that, because when they attend, it counts toward their attendance. If they elect not to attend during the, let's say that they are, they have a removal from school for 5 days. If they don't go to the Promise Center, then those 5 days would count toward them being chronically absent. So I think we have to, and that's where we are in terms of the data analysis and digging through that, is the connection to, this is what we're seeing with our students. This is what we're seeing in discipline. When we look at that data across the board, how are we seeing, what do those trends look like? And then what do we do next in terms of working through it?
Okay, thank you. I do have another question, and I'm glad that you raised the point about discipline, because I also want to raise the point about our students that are chronically ill. How does that impact the data, and how are we supporting those students and those families? Because of course, they would want to be in school, but because there's a chronic illness that does affect their ability to be present.
Right. And so, we do recognize that there are some students that, because of things like that, they're just not going to be, in their school environment. There isn't an excuse process, though, at the state level that supports those students being absent. So if they miss the days in terms of chronic absenteeism, then they're still counted as chronically absent. What we do find with many of the students that are in some of our homebound supported programs is when we are working with them, that we have reviewed that in terms of academics, and many of them are being academically successful, but they're just not able to come to school for some.
Yeah.
And then we also know that we have students that are assigned to our regular, our everyday schools that have some pretty chronic illnesses that they're just not able to be in school. There's also the option, and we have had some of this as well, where students are able to benefit from the virtual school, because the the way that they are counted in terms of attendance is a little bit different there. But a lot of times students, even if they are ill, they don't want to leave their school
Right.
environment. They want to stay
Yeah.
where they are.
Yeah.
And so do the parents.
Yeah, but thank you for sharing that because at least it provides, resources and information for families to know, to support their child or children.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I think to follow up on what the vice president was talking about, kind of the individual piece. It would be interesting to, and I'm sure we do this in some way, the kinds of absences that we have. And I think member Mapp kind of alluded to that as well. The absences due to illness, the absences due to trips or vacations or whatever. It'd be really great to break that down. It would seem like that's how you could actually focus in improving, another way of doing it besides all the way that we are currently doing it. Because the chronic absence it's a conglomeration of reasons for the
Right.
kids to be gone. And I know that we've talked about the trying to change the law or whatever about excused and unexcused. Could you talk a little bit more about that for us?
Right. So at the state level, it doesn't matter whether a student is marked excused or unexcused. If they're absent, it counts toward their chronic absenteeism. And so our reports that we review actually do break down based on the information that's provided, why a student is absent. And I say why they're absent, why it's reported that they're
Yeah.
absent. So when there is when there is information that's reported for why they're absent. So that's one of the that's a part of the information that has gone around in conversation. One was around trying to change that process so that there is more focus that's given on excuse or the reason that students are absent versus just the fact that they're absent and it goes toward chronic absenteeism. The other thing that was talked about at the state level, it has not passed at this point, but there was a bill to do some pilot work around giving a stipend to students and families for them attending school. So they were looking at two school districts, one urban, one rural, to see if that would be something that would offer assistance as well. Because we were really pleased to look at this data, especially even at the high school level, because what we find with a lot, and we have identified this, so that's why I raise it. We find with many of our high school students, some of them are absent because they are going to work. And so when we think through that, being able to address that as well and how we may be able to offer support to families. So that's something that we, work through. There are permits that are given to them. The expectation is that they're working outside of school hours, but we know that that would then require businesses to support that. So when we had, I think, our earlier conversation, it may have been one of the joint conversations with the between the school board and the mayor and the city council, that was one of the things that we raised, really working with businesses around not working school age students during their school day. So because for many, if they can choose going to work or going to school, for some of them with the way they're trying to take care of themselves and sometimes help support their family, that's a hard choice for a child to have to make.
My recollection too, that this absenteeism is also part of the report card.
So that's the other part of the
And that's
conversation.
sort of a
Yeah,
cultural,
yeah.
Whammy on us or any districts that have a significant amount of poverty or what have you. It's just one more way to get us to a certain extent. So I think the other piece about that absenteeism, the public sees when we print that we have this chronic absenteeism, the public thinks that all of those absences are kids cheating. Or they do, they're not interpreting it that is generally absence. They don't think that that includes children that are ill or children that are on vacation or they really don't. They think that when we use that word chronic absenteeism, they're thinking that we have that many kids that are consistently unexcused and not coming. because maybe they're predisposed to think bad things about teenagers particularly or whatever. But it's one of those messaging issues that I wish we could kind of address in some way, shape, or form.
I
Superintendent?
agree. And there are two more things in terms of, the chronic absenteeism conversation has been one that has been elevated since COVID and across the country. And so one of the things that many states are doing is looking at removing that area in terms of chronic absenteeism as an indicator for students, because they're seeing that even districts that are not urban school districts are also now being impacted by chronic absenteeism. And so while the numbers may not be as high as ours, they're double, sometimes triple, what they've been in at other times. So this was something that there was an article on this in the news about 2 or 3 weeks ago where it talked about areas in Ohio and specifically around Cincinnati proper that were all working to address this chronic absenteeism conversation at the same time. So I thank you for sharing that, but recognizing that we are really being intentional about it and looking at it from all sides. But yes, the education around what it really means and how we can give families additional strategies, we'll continue to do that work.
I'll go over to Chairman Craig and then I'll come back over here.
I was just going to add to your point about also tardiness is another thing that is a factor. And then students who leave early for different things throughout the day are also counted towards, and I don't know that it's one of those things to the education point. I don't know that folks always think about if my child's just late for first period every day, that adds up pretty quickly to them being chronically absent. Whereas they think of a day of being out of school versus hours of being out of school.
And if I can give one quick celebration there, I was at College Hill last week and I was standing in the hallway. In the center of the universe. I was at College Hill and I was standing in the office and a parent came in and she spoke to me. I wish I would have gotten her name. And she spoke to me when she came in and she said, "We're coming in a little late, but I wanted to make sure that he got here today because I wanted to make sure that counted towards his attendance." So I celebrate the school because they're also elevating the importance of attendance. The mom said he had a doctor's appointment that morning, but she didn't want him to miss the whole day. And so the more that we're getting that message out there, the more important that it does become. Because we do hourly in terms of attendance. It's not just the day or the morning or afternoon, it's hourly.
Comment?
Yeah, I actually, Mr. Kearney sent us an article around SB 49, March the 1st. And I've always intended I was going to ask this in health and safety, but since we're talking about absenteeism, I'm happy to bring it up here. This SB 49, Mike, I do have a question for you. It passed the Senate unanimously and they've got some changes, some proposed changes. One of it is to require school districts to excuse students for 4-H and future farmers. But the other is to change the definition of chronic absenteeism. So it no longer includes excused absences. And then to not count excused absences towards habitual truancy or excessive absenteeism until a student has more than 60 hours of excused absences. And there's 2 or 3 other things, but with regard to graduation, it says update the state's graduation rate formula so schools and districts are not penalized. My question is, do we know how those simple changes, proposed changes, which it looks like are going to pass, will have an impact on us and our graduation rate and then our report card with regard to absenteeism?
So I don't know. We know that because the inclusion of students or the removal of the excused absence piece, we know that will improve the chronic absenteeism number, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily change the fact that the students are still out of school, but it changes that number. Right now, in terms of the report card, we believe that would have a positive impact as well, because that's just one area of an indicator. So that was what you were referencing earlier about the excused and unexcused. This particular report that was given by our lobbyists, that's the one that also included the conversation around trying to pay students to go to school as well, selecting certain dates, because shortly after that, there was on Lucy May, there was a conversation around absenteeism and what that would look like. So I'm not sure if it's going to pass or not, but we do believe that if it does, it would have a positive impact on the overall numbers, even though we would still want to encourage the students to be in school because it doesn't change the fact that, you know, whether it's excused or whether it's not. In many instances, the difference in an excused absence and an unexcused absence is the writing of a note. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, that's the reason. It's just that there's documentation that supports that. So we would still want to encourage students to be in school, but we think in terms of your overall question that it could have a positive impact on the data itself.
Okay, I just was, with them changing definitions, I just was wondering if we had a sense of, hey, that will help us out because it will take the number where we got dinged on this report, on the district report card, it would increase it by X number. That's what I was really looking for.
So on the report card, the attendance goes into an overall index. So it's a part of the report card. So it could improve that indicator in the index,
Right.
but collectively, it would be a part of that overall index that it could improve, which would be a plus for us.
Well, then I'll still bring it up, I guess, in health and safety, because it talks about the graduation rate formula. It talks about legitimate excuse, from what you mentioned, excused and unexcused, because I'm still kind of curious if it would help us, if this bill, do we need to lobby as electeds? Do we need to get up there and write some letters around making sure that we get this passed, or is this going to be detrimental to the district is what I was really asking.
Right. So I think the response is shared, and is that if there is an opportunity for students that are absent to have a difference in excused versus unexcused, it will improve the district's chronic absenteeism overall numbers. The improvement of those numbers would improve that index on the report card, so it would help us. You're welcome.
Great. Other comments or questions for this one? This particular topic? Great, good dialogue. I will add, I say it all the time, right before COVID, the district, Cleveland district, did a community-wide effort, and it was kind of cute. It was at 10 dance. And so, so wherever you were in Cleveland, supposedly, if you were participating in it, when it became 10 a.m., whether you were a news anchor or a shop clerk, whatever, somebody would have mentioned a 10 dance, and all it does, besides being kind of cute and emphasizing it, it does make it a community effort, that attendance is such a big priority. But there's some really cute videos left over from that. I remember a board member, actually President Hurd up in Cleveland was so proud of that because it actually worked. And then of course, COVID happened and everything is ACBC for COVID. Yes.
And you brought me back to thinking about Cleveland. I think earlier I said the Bengals were a part of Stay in the Game. It's actually FC Cincinnati. So I wanted to correct that. So I say the right thing. And the other thing is when we were talking about the virtual students come to school. I was describing CDA, well, Gilligan. Just to clarify that for everyone, that was the description. But the virtual students actually do come to school.
Well, then I think this has been great. Financial literacy?
Sure.
Next
So
presentation.
our Chief Academic Officer, Shakitha Butler, is going to review our financial literacy. Right up here in the middle.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Good evening.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Board and Superintendent Wright for allowing me to present this presentation. Before I get started, I just wanted to give some brief acknowledgements for the team that worked on the committee. We have the team led by Dr. Don Williams, Emily Campbell. We had our pilot teachers, our CFT curriculum council, and our community partners who participated in the survey. So I just want to thank everyone for all their contributions to this update that I'm providing tonight. Just to kind of remind you of how this all started with Senate Bill 1, it was released to require that our students who entered the ninth grade in 2022 to have financial literacy as a half credit prior to graduation. Since then, or since my last update, we have went back, the team has gone back, and we reviewed the 4 curriculums that we presented in January. Our pilot teachers were allowed to select 2 of the curriculum of their choice to pilot for 2 weeks each. We took surveys from both teachers and students, and also took it to our curriculum council to give us information and feedback on those 4 vendor curricula. Next slide. Another update I want to bring to you, which speaks to questions that the board have when we last spoke, was around what teachers are required or qualified to teach the course. In January, if you recall, only social studies teachers. And other teachers would have to go through validation, or the validation was still to be determined. Right now, that has increased to include our math teachers, our family and community consumer science teachers may also teach the financial literacy course without needing validation. So that opens up more educators that are available to teach the course to our students. Next slide. With reviewing the 4 curricula, we found that all 4 met our criteria. As you know, we form these curriculum councils, and we decide what our criteria is for what we want in a curriculum adoption, and all 4 met the criteria. Next slide. So again, when I was here before, you asked for us to bring back the survey information for you to be able to review of how we piloted the information and the feedback that we received from the community. As you can see, we received feedback from 12 teachers, and the scores are to the far right column of how those different vendors performed, with NextGen and EverFi at the top from the teacher survey. I provided for you on this slide, but you have the rest of the information in your packet. But on the slide here, what you see are the ratings or the rankings for the first choice from the community survey. Junior achievement rose up to the top as a first choice more frequently from the community survey, and then NextGen, EverFi, and Budget Challenge. But I wanted to point out to you that when you consider EverFi coming in with only 5 votes for first choice, they received the most votes for second and third choice. However, Budget Challenge received the most responses for fourth choice within that survey from the community. One more. With our students, we wanted their feedback too. We wanted to know how did they engage with the curriculum that they were experiencing from the teacher. And so they particularly liked EverFi and NextGen. They really didn't have an opinion about the other 2, but they really were very responsive to NextGen and EverFi. So our final results on the next slide, which leads to our recommendations, are for 3, EverFi, NextGen, and Junior Achievement. Our rationale for presenting these 3 to you has to do with, of course, all of them met the criteria that the Curriculum Council created and approved, but also these were the 3 highest rated from the various group and stakeholder engagement that we received throughout the pilot. The curriculum is high quality. It gives our instructors a lot of choice to be able to select the curriculum that they feel best works best for their teaching style and for their school community, and it provides high quality engagement for the students. So we are presenting these top 3 choices so that teachers can select which of the curriculum they would like to use when they offer the financial literacy curriculum. And that concludes our presentation.
Questions, comments? Mr. Lindy has a question, I know, about survey or something. No.
No, President Bolton, that's about money. Chief Butler, the open source, does that mean free?
That means free.
So we can make all 3 available, teachers can pick, and it costs us 0.
0.
I think every presentation should be like this.
Let's make a policy. Other questions, comments?
Yes,
Vice
I just have
President?
one quick question. So regarding the community engagement that was done on the website, when was that done? And what was was it like a survey link or?
Two engagement windows. We had an engagement that was a 3-week window from January through February, and then we opened it up again in April.
And who did this go to in terms of,
It
was there an
placed on
announcement?
It was placed on our district website.
And did an announcement go out to parents?
It was placed on our district website and through social media.
So the reason why I'm asking, just curious.
I can't remember if we did robocalls.
Yeah, I was gonna
in
say,
the
so
first one.
would this have been for just ninth grade families to answer, or is this open to just everyone?
It's open to everyone. So if you recall, back when we first brought the adoption, we brought it with social studies.
Right.
And so both
right.
of those came out at the same time.
at
And
the
that
same
it
time.
was the same
Okay,
engagement
so I
window.
missed that.
So I can't remember if we did robocalls back then, but it was all a part of that package.
Okay, because I just wanted to know who all basically from the community was engaged in that prospect. Was it ninth grade families?
Open to
Was
the
it
public.
specifically for everyone? Okay,
Mhm.
thanks.
Okay, other questions, comments? I have just I don't know, this is at least I don't know, in the last 10 years, I think this is at least the 4th time that the state legislature has made some sort of demand on us about financial literacy. And I think it's probably maybe a dozen times in the last 16 years that I've been on the board, and everybody gets real excited about it, and we build it into the schedule, and then the state legislature then asks that we do this as well. What happens to those other courses for financial literacy that we've been kind of forced to adopt? I think rightfully so, but forced to adopt or use. I mean, do they just fall by the wayside? Do they get absorbed into the curriculum? I mean, it just seems like on a cyclical basis, the state legislature says you need to be teaching more financial literacy. What?
So the curriculum that we selected meet the criteria for what this particular bill
Mhm.
states. And what we will be providing from the curriculum department are 3 instructional pacing guides for all 3 of these curriculums so that the teachers are able to offer what is aligned to what the state is requiring. So our expectation is that the 3 that we are providing the
doing
curriculum
this.
guides for, which is aligned with what the state, with what the bill is requiring us to do, is that those will be used.
Okay, I think it just kind of gets absorbed or whatever, and it's probably, that's okay. We probably don't teach it enough. The other question, and again, this is, and the superintendents assured us, I think, a couple of weeks ago about this, but I had heard some degree of rumor or whatever that this was, and I'm hoping that it's not true. Somehow this was bumping some of our emphasis on whether it be AP or regular, whatever that means, African-American history.
Yes, I heard the concern as well.
Yeah.
And it was a concern. It truly was a concern because of what the state was originally recommending as the educator who should teach the course.
Okay.
If you recall in the previous presentation, it doesn't count as a math credit, it counts as an elective or a social studies credit. So prior to this new March update, I think the update came out March 13th. Prior to March 13th, that was the direction in which we were going. However, since then, and I think this is a celebration, it's promising, now our math instructors are able to teach the course, consumer science. So that means that the onus of this doesn't rest solely on the shoulders of our social studies teachers, because it was a decision of really putting some guardrails around making sure we protect our African-American history course, because we know that that's part of what makes us who we are as CPS. There's just, I got a lot of feedback about the pride around
Okay,
that course and making sure that we put guardrails in place. So with this new update about not needing validation for other educators to teach it, it released some of that concern from what we were getting from the community.
Superintendent?
If I could also-
Thank you for that answer. It makes me feel better.
Yes,
Superintendent.
if I can also add, just to piggyback on that. So when we talked about this before, and I shared that that wouldn't be the case for us, I do want to call out support to Representative Sykes, because we had previous conversation about this before then. And so it was already being proposed that the certifications that were needed for this particular course were being updated. Because there were also, if you recall, there was also conversation around the AP economics courses, for example, and that they did not want to initially allow that course to count for the financial literacy piece when it's really taking students over and beyond. So there was some work that was done from some of our representatives as well around getting involved in that conversation. So I want to call that out also.
Sometimes it helps to have two former school board members in the group coming from Hamilton County. So thank him for that. That's very important. So this helps count towards a math credit in some way, shape, or form.
Not now, it doesn't.
No, it's not gonna count as a math credit, but at least it can be taught by a math
Taught by
teacher. I
math.
know
Gotcha.
Board Member Craig talked about it being incorporated into math. Board Member Moffitt, when I last presented, talked about it being incorporated in CTE. So with this new update, it brings more possibilities and opportunities to do those things.
And I also appreciate the fact that Rep. Sykes did reach out directly to ask that question, to ask how this would impact us. So we were able to be honest about that up front, and, being able to have that information and know that how it would impact us was beneficial.
Great. Other comments, questions? Dr. Moffitt?
Did you have one? I didn't mean to step in front of you.
I'm working my way down.
Gotcha. Thank you for this information and for the update, because it's very helpful. I'm glad to see it. Of course, you already know I'm gonna go to slide 4 with the engagement numbers, the number of responses. That it just can, what's the possible total number that we could have engaged? And these just seem rather low. Is this out of 75 students, were there only like 100 possible? Like what were the possible numbers of engagement? It just seems
So
like,
the student surveys were based on the students who participated in the pilot.
okay.
So it was just those 5 teachers who did the pilot. So that's where the student numbers come from.
So like roughly 20 students per teacher. So it's a small number of all of these. So for there's the teachers and then the community survey, those were only the parents of those students. Like how do we get to 42?
So the survey was placed online. And so it's a combination of parents, community members, teachers, just whoever decided to participate in the survey from the website.
So for me, just the numbers just seem kind of low as far as engagement. And I really wish we had done more, even having you do a video or something to say, hey, can you engage with this, so that we get a wider breadth of responses. It's just, I hate making decisions on small numbers, but other than that, I think that some of the results that you presented are great. At least it's movement forward. So thank you.
Thank you. What I would say is we're committed to continuous improvement. So we're always seeking feedback from our teachers, from our students around the curriculum. So that is something that is ongoing, that we're updating as we go. So even after there's a vote and we know what curriculum we're using, we'll continue to seek feedback and make improvements to what the students are experiencing on a daily basis.
Well, that's good to know, because then maybe if we have some data from, like, let's say after first semester next year, we can lobby up at the state level as electeds to say, hey, this is what we're finding within our district based off of what you share. So that'd be great.
All right, thank you.
Member Mapp.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about our current vendors that focus on financial wellness, that are, working with our students. How are they going to be abreast of the curriculum and ensure that there's alignment in the information that they're providing, and aligning it with the work that the students will be doing in their actual courses?
Are you asking about after-school partners?
So that may be, I don't know if it's just for after school or if there are vendors that come in during the day that work with our students as well.
Sure. So this adoption is about the course for credit. When I brought it before, I think there was some concern about different vendors that we have partners with. What we're hoping is that everything will be seamless. I can't remember, because I know there was one partnership that was announced. I can't remember the bank.
Fidelity Financial.
Fidelity.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
it.
So I think one of the things to the question more directly, because that's not a piece that we talked about. So just to kind of call it out, in several of the schools, there are, or a few of the schools, I won't say several, a few, there are partners that go in outside of the work that's happening from junior achievement, but there are partners that go in to offer financial literacy to the students. I think the question is, what could there be, or what would the alignment look like? I think one of the things that we could do with them is offer them the opportunity, because those are things that are generated at the school. So those are partnerships that happen at the school, whether they're doing that through resource coordinating or any of those things. We could offer them the opportunity to come in and review the different curriculums that we're using with them to have conversation around alignment. I just want to make sure that there's clarity that what they're doing with the students can't count for credit, because the person that is teaching the course has to be certified in one of those areas. A couple of weeks ago, I think the last time that I was on the Lincoln Ware show, there was a gentleman that called in that said, I'm trying to get into the schools because I want to do financial literacy. He specifically wanted to do it at Woodward. So he has a program that he does already. We have to make sure, and in follow-up, have to make sure that they understand that that doesn't count for the students to get this credit. But that's something that we can actually do. The Fidelity program, however, is being piloted with 8th grade students, because ultimately the goal would be to begin to integrate even younger, so that as students are, growing up and going through school, they're going in with the understanding of what the programming is.
But that's also, thank you for that, Superintendent Wright. That's also the reason why we're offering 3 instead of just having a sole curriculum provider, because we are aware that schools have different partners in focus. And so this allows them the opportunity to select the one that's better aligned with what they're doing at their school community.
Thank you for that clarification. And I think it's great, as much as we can have that level of continuity, I think it will be helpful across the board. So thank you.
Mr. Craig?
Just really quickly, I wanted to highlight one of the thoughts that I think you already shared, but I think it's something that was shared with me when I was running as well for some of the students, is the desire to learn how they do their regular daily operations. And in some ways, they're thinking about concepts was something that they thought these were abstract concepts that were outside of what you would normally learn in a math course or in a history course. And I appreciate the fact that we've now been able to incorporate that into those folks who can teach it. And I think one of the things that might be also an interesting kind of look into some of this stuff is, as well as we expand it out, is to how are schools thinking innovatively in the ways of incorporating the things that the students experience in their daily lives as part of that work. Because I think one of the things I appreciated in the commentary that we did see in some of the reports from the students was saying, I like learning how to make a budget. I like learning how to buy things. Right now, I don't know if they understand that money ain't real, that they, but I think that was one of the things I heard a lot from people talk about. I want to learn how to balance a checkbook, which again, there's adults who would be like, I'm signing up for that course also. But even thinking about how they prepare, because one of the concerns that I do hear on the college campuses these days and around a lot of college experiences is they don't understand how much money they're signing themselves up to and responsibility for until they get through with their school and see this large dollar amounts of student loan debt, of credit card debt, of things that I want the nice apartment, so I spend an extra $2,000 for my apartment instead of a decent, like that type of stuff is stuff that I think when they're more engrossed into the world of understanding budgets, understanding finances, they pay attention to, especially when it's their money that they have to pay attention to.
That's right.
And then the other thing is, I just wanted to make sure that we are, as part of those extra conversations, still also talking about or open up space for folks to come in with regard to financial aid and those type of things with some of our students, because I think we've been doing that a little bit, but I know that there are some changes that are coming down the pipe that could be another way, again, to use the skills they've learned in class to apply to their own live experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Any last questions? I think we got everybody. Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Before we move on to some of the last items regarding summer school and the Carson update as part of the inquiries and updates, wanted to just address the two documents that were shared at the last meeting. One was the rather extensive chart on the ad hoc recommendations. And we've now put that up on the board docs as it was last Friday as well. And then also we have said to obviously in sharing that document and also the budget recommendations. We've updated the budget recommendations, I think in part because of questions towards the end of the evening about where these individual ones come. We've tried to source those items as best we could. So now that's been, I believe, uploaded onto board docs with the sourcing per item. It's, I think the intention to the administration has gotten back to us on a number of the budget items with some yeses and some nos. And just wanted to ask the superintendent, is there a willingness or an intention to provide additional information regarding costs for these items that were on that document?
So the information that we did clarity around were the recommendations for that would reduce the budget.
Right.
And so those were the areas that we did. So there wasn't work around anything that would increase the budget.
Perfectly understandable. So, but we would be expecting the ones that were reductions, whatever that might mean. Are we expecting to see the costs
Yeah,
and
so
the possible reductions for each of those items eventually, or?
sure, if we go to, we added it to the agenda item just in case it was going to come up for discussion. So I didn't know if we were discussing it today or not. But if we go to, if we were going through it today or not, I did know that we would
Okay.
be talking about it, but I didn't know
Right.
if we would be going through it. So if we go to the budget slide, we just used the same one from the last
Yes.
time. There are two things that are here. The first, before we go there, please, if we'll go to the budget suggestion recommendations provided by the board office to administration. It's in the agenda items. So we'll point out where these are coming from. It's in the actual agenda item on board docs. While he's pulling that up, I do have a question about the one that's showing on the screen. So I did see this update in terms of on some of the areas where it says administration. Can we clarify what that means? Because there were specific ones that said treasurer. So is it to imply that administration, that wasn't for me, I don't believe.
No,
So
that
what
was
does that
not-
mean?
Exactly. That's not specifically from you. If it's administration, it came from the internal operations, I guess, sometimes from maybe a board committee or a comment or dialogue here that was shared. So no,
Okay,
if it says treasurer, it was specifically from the treasurer. And if it's administration, it came from internal suggestions.
understood. So just wanted to clarify that
Absolutely.
just because that's caused some questions, of course,
bet.
throughout the organization quite a bit. So just wanted to make sure that the staff knows that we've not said something. We've been really transparent with what we've recommended.
Well-
And so did not want them to think that we are recommending something that we did not, i.e. usually
Exactly.
when we see administration, that's been related to me. Okay, so we'll go to the document, this one. So if you'll scroll down to where it shows reductions all the way down, all the way about, I think right there is where we start. So this is the section that we responded to, okay?
Yeah, it's a Heinz 57.
Gotcha. So this is the section that we responded to. If we will now go to the document that. In your link from board docs that shows the budget slide information, we just added it to that budget chart that you already have. So if you'll
Right.
go to the budget status from the last meeting or any of them that you have, because the links we just update there so that you're able to see our consistent, you're able to always see the work and it's in one place. when you go to the budget choices slide, this is it's the fourth one in that says response to assignment reductions and eliminations. So in the link that you have your disclaimer sheet is first, and that's where we're keeping the running total of where we are in terms of recommendations. And then the choices working draft, and then the unsupported choices. And the next one is response to assignment reductions and eliminations. So that's what you see here that's on the screen. And is the request for us to go through them individually, or how would you like for us to share this part?
Probably not today, but I think that those areas where, since we're concentrating on the reductions, where there's not monies written in, we don't have necessarily the capacity to figure out the costs or the savings. Just wondering if the administration's going to be able to provide what some of those savings might be, or say there's no savings. I see there's some yeses and some nos. I'm not sure what not applicable means, the NA piece. So I think it's rather trying to fill these Heinz 57 with what savings there could be or what costs they represent. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
So if we go to the admin notes, which is in column F, that gives specificity around each of the areas that were listed. In terms of the recommendations, the response to the recommendation is in the admin notes, and whether or not there was support from administration to make that particular recommendation. Most of what we see here was already a part, in terms of the recommendations for reductions, they were already a part of what had already been approved. So that's why we started the list with already complete. If we'll scroll to the bottom, just scroll down just a little bit.
President Bolton, I have a point of order when you get a chance.
Okay.
In terms of, there were a couple that were, that had there was a recommendation that was around, one of them around a contract, that was another one that we updated as well. And the cost amount was already included. So this is how we responded to this.
Okay.
In terms of overall organization. There was a specific question, and we gave specifics in the responses so that there is an opportunity to ask additional questions as they arise.
That's helpful. And before I go to Dr. Moffitt, then some of them also say, as I read them, this really is part of ad hoc rather than budget. So there's a mixture there that's probably confusing. And as we'll be doing both eventually, we'll try to keep them as separate as we can. Dr. Moffitt.
So I just want to clarify, because I'm a little confused as to the process of this. I was under the impression that there was a call for suggestions cumulatively from board members, and also from minutes of meetings and things that we've discussed. There was a document that was presented that had 50 some odd things on it. And the assignment to the administration was to complete the chart. And then in my mind, and I want to clarify, was to complete it with amounts, not just amounts where they were supportive or not. I thought that the entire document was to be completed with an amount, and in addition to support or not support, but we needed to get that information that we don't have from a financial standpoint. So is that not, I'm just saying that I don't think that this is complete with empty numbers there. Did I misunderstand the assignment that was provided?
No, I don't think so. I think certainly expectation would be that we'd like, since we don't have the capacity to figure out what that might mean, that we would have to go to the administration for that kind of input or that kind of data. And I would hope that there's still an opportunity to provide additional information for those. I am trying to figure out if the administration doesn't support it, is the administration saying we're not going to take the time to do that now? Or I don't want us, we're not looking for any conflict. We're just trying to figure out where the priorities would be to meet the expectation that you could help us figure out if some of these represent savings or worthy savings of costs.
So for clarity, getting this document last week, so I first want to acknowledge that. What I shared in the meeting was that we would go through and we would respond because the conversation was around budget reductions.
Mhm.
Because when we received this, based on what was shared and not really being clear what was on the list, we received it as recommendations for budget to close our budget gap. So that is the entry point that we entered into doing this level of work. So we went into the document in the area that said budget reductions and pulled out everything there and responded to that area. In terms of, so if the ask at this point is to go in and add totals to the other areas, and it's a recommendation that's not supported by the administration, because some of these also get into the order and organization of the district, and there's a add here. The board has given us a responsibility of what it is that we're to do, and while that may be a particular area that someone may not agree with, you've given me the responsibility to do that. So I'm sharing with you what we need in order for that to happen. So that's the first part here. In terms of the other areas, many of them were increases and would take still more time working through the treasurer's office to actually do that level of work. And I don't believe that prior to us trying to close the budget conversations that we're in a position to do that.
If I could respond to that, I agree with that. I think that the multiple sections, again, address the issue of we've been spending this time, rightfully so, dealing with the absence of revenue and closing the gap in that revenue. That's a building block, the most essential, critical thing we have to do. Got that. And we spent a lot of time, and you all have spent far more than we have. So I understand not doing that, the section of general or whatever else, initiatives or whatever. I understand not dealing with that right now. But as we look at the cuts or proposed cuts, we have yeses and nos and non-applicable. I would hope that there would be some kinds of additional dollars if available to know. There's narrative for almost all of them. I appreciate that. The kinds of things that would cost or could do whatever. But yes, I would still want to see the kinds of costs or kinds of savings that it might represent. Mr. Lindy, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, President Bolden. I was just going to share that from my understanding of our discussion at the last board meeting and what the assignment was, this feels highly aligned to my understanding what we talked about. I think there was some concern from at least me about not being entirely sure what this document was or where it came from when it posted, and then to ask for a comprehensive analysis on such a quick turnaround with such little prior exposure felt unreasonable. And so what my understanding of what the assignment was to come back with as much of a response as one can put together, given the context. And that's not to say there isn't more work to do, but I find this very helpful.
I think we're agreeing on that. There's an expectation, I think, for that to happen. And that's why we really wanted to source it as best we could, because that helps clarify it to a certain extent. So that good enough guidance on at least the Heinz 57. We've got the commentary, and we've got some opinions, judgments, rightfully so, about what can work, what couldn't work. But to the degree that we could find some more knowledge about the kinds of dollars, Dr. Moffitt?
So I still am asking for a point of order. If this is incomplete, is this something that we're to be expected to vote on when it's not completed?
We're not voting today.
Okay, that's what I just,
To Mr. Lindy's point, they're coming back with more information, just like we augmented the list with the sourcing, which was a request. So now we're just trying to fill this chart out, so to speak. And the administration has maybe some more work to do regarding dollars, and not concentrating on the first 2 or 3 categories, but just on the ones that are listed as possible.
so that
reductions.
I'm clear, and we can hopefully be clear when we give a directive to the administration. What is the expectation? Is the expectation that there be an estimate for numbers placed in areas, whether or not there's agreement or not, so that the board can see what that number is? Or is it that we're just looking at where there is buy-in from the administration? I personally wanted some of these to have numbers there so that I could see what the cost is, whether or not there's alignment or not. So I want to understand, and that's what my point of order is, what is the expectation for administration to do? Because I think they need further clarification. Are we saying that we want this to be completed and we will look at this again on the 29th with the expectation to vote? I guess I want to know that part.
Mr. Lindy, and then I'll respond to that too.
And I don't know which ones Dr. Moffett there, because there are multiple, but I just in looking at some examples, the first one on here that has admin support response of no is one we voted on as a board and already voted not to do.
In part. Number 4.
This is I'm looking at reference number 4.
Well, this includes the chief, the APs. It's bigger than just the APs of culture. We don't have a number for what the totality of that particular number is.
I follow. That makes sense to me. I think the thing I'm trying to advocate for is that if the board's already voted on some things that are a part of what's in here, I didn't want to recreate, I didn't want to
Oh, yeah.
unwind all that.
We tried to, on the original document, I think we lined some of the stuff green, and I think since that time, we've actually been able to line some more green, if I recall. My expectation is that throughout this whole process, when we've been asked to vote, and these grueling meetings, representing grueling thousands of hours before for the administration, there's been a dollar amount associated with the vote, which helps us determine, is it worth whatever we're asking of. So it would be my expectation that to the degree possible, for the administration to supply at least some sort of range. I think that would be very helpful for me, because that's the information we had the other times we've had to vote. Mr. Craig.
Again, I think this is, I think what has been said has been kind of what my understanding was, is that they would come back with some information. It would not necessarily be the full, complete thing of what we would end up doing or seeing, but is at least putting some ideas behind the different points in there. I think one of the things maybe I think would be helpful for us to kind of give direction on is there are certain items that either are adding, potentially would add to the budget, which I think we've already kind of expressed, may not be, the dollar amount is not a reduction. So therefore, it would maybe not necessarily need to be provided as to how much this would add to the budget at this point. Because it's not necessarily the thing we're looking at, but there are a number of ones that are also part of the ad hoc conversation that I think also may not need to be priced out in the same way as there are other things that even though we've already done, that I think there's probably a dollar amount that the treasurer's office, when they're back, can assist with putting together. Especially since some of these have either already been completed or already been voted on. But I think one of the things I would think might be helpful for us to provide an answer to the superintendent on is there are a number of things on here that, again, the administration may not support those things or may not be, that are, potential reductions in costs or whatever. Are we asking them to put a dollar amount to those items, those type of items? So I think of ones that may be, rescinding contracts or stuff like that, that we have, that they may not be in support of, but are we asking them to give a dollar amount to what that cost is? Because I think that clarity, to Dr. Moffitt's point earlier, that clarity as to, are we asking them only give dollar amounts of things that the administration is supportive of? Are we asking them to give stuff that's not supportive of? Are we asking them to give dollar amounts to anything that's ad hoc related? And I think we've kind of said no to that part, and no, or at least not for right now, for us to think about and talk about when it comes to budget reduction.
If I could respond real quick before the superintendent does on that one. Certainly, I think we've eliminated the first few categories that the superintendent already told us we're not doing those right now because we got to close the gap before we can talk about where we're going. And so they have not addressed those, which is fine. And I think there are also a half dozen in here, Mike, that are actually related to the ad hoc. I think forget those in the time being. But would I say that even if the administration is opposed to something, would I like to see the dollars? As just one board member, yes, I would. I would, because I think that would help us. understand, and it doesn't mean that that the superintendent or the administration is approving it. I appreciate them saying yes and no for these things, but I still would like to see that the dollar amount is best a range, not down to the, forgive me, decimal. You know, I don't like it when I talk about decimals.
So for some of the areas, I think I understand what the ask is. So the ask is for some of the areas that, and I said for some, because for some of them, it doesn't correlate to the recommendation. So for example, if I look at line 10, where the reference is number 7, it was to reduce HR and talent department cost centers to FY22 budgets or by 50%. Well, the FY22 budget was 22 million, FY24 is 12. So that's already included. So I wouldn't put a number there because there's already been a $10 million reduction since 22. I think where
We divided the department up is what happened. That's, yeah, go ahead.
it was included in the
Gotcha.
overall numbers. And so when we go to the, please don't scroll yet. So I think where we say number, what would be row 7, reference 4, those additional positions, pull out the APs of culture and then cost out those other positions that are in there so that you can see the amount, even though we don't support the recommendation. So for the ones that we can do that on, we can do that.
That would be great, and it would be very helpful. And I think it would, again, in the interest of transparency and everybody working together on it, I think it would go far. If that's
However, also I do want to address, for example, eliminate teacher in charge where schools have 2 administrators. There would be a number to put there because that's already complete.
to be greened or whatever.
And it's already up there on the document where it says 9, already complete, and it's a yes in terms of support. So we'll go back through those few others, and where we can add additional dollars, we can add those dollars there.
Thank you. Craig, did you have a comment? Vice President?
Yes, I was just going to say, Superintendent, if you could go back, like you just stated, that you would add the numbers. I think that helps in terms of seeing the actual dollar amounts as well. So thank you.
We will do it for the ones where we can.
Yep, that's fine.
So I just want to clarify the ones, because I don't know what we can means. So I'm specifically looking to get a number for number 9, the district car and driver for the superintendent. Number 28, non-mileage and non-Ohio travel reduced by 80%. I just want a number. And the panorama, number 50, those, and then number 41. So I didn't want it to come back to be like, oh, we couldn't put a number there. I would like to know what those numbers are specifically.
For every one of them that we can put a number there, we will. If we're not able to put a number there, then we won't be able to fill in a number. So for every one of them that has a cost associated with that we can put a number in, we'll put a number there for you.
It doesn't really answer my question.
Reaching the witching hour because there's a major performance scheduled at some.
Tonight is the Hyde Park Elementary Spring Concert, and my daughter's first grade class is performing at 6. So I'm here for another 5 minutes. And please do not take it's not painful, it's wonderful. Please do not take my exit as anything other than a dad going to see his daughter perform. Thank you.
We're going to lose 2 of these people, and then we're going to conclude the last 2 items. So thank you. Let's go to the last part. Appreciate the dialogue. And I think we have an update regarding summer school and Carson, if I recall.
Thank you. So we're pulling up the summer school presentation. We did discuss this during a bit during the last meeting, but this is the presentation that I sent to you prior to that last meeting. We have made one update here as well to make certain that we're also providing services to our ELL students that are our early language students as well. So that would be the only change. If we'll go to the next slide. Mixed purpose, as we shared from before, starting at 2018, how summer school was used, the cost for 2018, and where the cost was for summer of 2023. Next slide. The overall adjustments for summer from 23 to 24, we still have designated host sites, moving from grade levels 2 to 12. We are now doing grade levels 3rd and 9th through 12th. And the addition that will be added to this, after having some additional discussion yesterday, will be our ELL students that are 4th grade and up that are in our SLIFE program. So those are our early language students for English language learners. Okay. Enrichment, we understand that there's not additional enrichment. That's why we're moving to the language of summer recovery. The teaching ratios follow the academic guidelines, the para ratios. There is a para, there are 2 para, a para for every 3rd grade classroom in the building for 24, and a para, an additional para to support the building. Interventionist is based on the need for the students, and the start times are consistent by school type. Next slide. Next slide, please. So our key elements, our days for summer are June the 3rd through the 26th. The times for elementary are from 8 to 10:30. Remember, the focus for summer is only for reading. And so it's giving over 20 additional hours for students for reading during the summer. For secondary, 9 to 2:35, depending on the needs of the students, but they can leave whenever they're done if they don't need all of that time for the courses. We have designated sites, and then we share the information about the targeted students. Next slide. In terms of the schedule, this just gives an overview of the schedule, very similar to the schedule that we shared last year, with the exception that 3rd grade students will be dismissed earlier. Next slide. In terms of parameters, sharing just from the information that's already been provided, we do have host sites. Transportation will be provided for our students based on the start day and the end day of the elementary school. Students will be assigned to summer based on where they live. So they're not assigned based on the school where they go to school currently. So it's getting them to the closest school that is to them so that they're able to go to that school as a host site. In terms of staffing, we checked the numbers yesterday. We have several staff members that have applied for summer. And so we feel good about making sure that we have coverage in terms of us, of the summer school and our summer school sites and our students. Grades 3, the max hours for the teachers is 3 hours, and 9 through 12 is 6 hours. And then there's the planning time that's contractual. Next slide. These are the positions that are being staffed district-wide, and essentially that means we have students that come from all over to take these courses. So this is the same process that we used last year in terms of being able to provide services for them. And these are our host sites: Roberts, Parker Woods, Roseland, Condon, and Evanston. And for our high school sites, Dater and Gamble, Woodward, Schroeder and Taft, Clark, Withrow, and then any student that wants to do summer school virtually will be able to do that through Gilligan. And SCPA is a summer site as well. SCPA in that, so the sites are West High, Aiken, Hughes, Walnut, Gilligan, formerly CDA, and SCPA. And the other students attend based on where they're enrolled. Key dates: we started the process for enrollment. We started to receive applications for staff. The enrollment period closes on the 26th. And then from there, we will start the staffing process to make sure that we're prepared to move into that process. And then the first day of summer recovery is on June the 3rd. The other addition that we already have on our website, on the page on our website for summer recovery, we do have links there as we're collecting other programs. We talked about this the last time, but as we're collecting other programs that are offering services, we are adding them to the website as well. So if families are looking for additional opportunities, we're at least trying to put those in one location so they have a way to review those. And I'll stop now for questions.
Questions, comments for these updates? Mr. Craig?
Just one comment, and I don't know how many students this will actually affect, but I know like some years, parents have used different programs throughout the city to take care of and provide resources to the students after they would leave from their summer classes. And so I just wanted to know if that's something, for instance, if a parent has a child in a program that may not be necessarily near their home, but it might be simpler to transport them to that location. Is that something they could have that conversation around on one-offs? Because I don't think that should be a rule per se, but to at least express those concerns with regards to needing the child closer to either after school or before school care, that kind of thing?
So that comes to deviated stops. So what we would want to do is deal with that on the front end by where we assign the student to go for summer versus sending them to the place closest to their home and then having to transport them somewhere else.
Okay, and so there's a way that they can have that conversation in the process.
They would want to start that conversation at the school level as they're looking at, where it is that they're going, because as we're assigning them, they're going through the portal to sign up. But as we are assigning them, we are assigning them based on their school, based on where they live. We're assigning them to schools based on where they live.
And I think that's just one of those things, again, it's the unique things that sometimes happen with our students during the summer, is that there's a lot of different resources within the city that provide opportunities for our students to learn, grow, and be better. And we want to make sure we're not disrupting that process.
And also to your question, Board Member Craig, the other piece that's not on the slide, but we do want to raise because I'm sure it will become a question, is there's been a long-standing historical process at Walnut where their 7th and 8th grade students did go to summer and have summer opportunities. So we are continuing that for them because that's been a part of their overall programming. But they have to provide their own transportation. It's only for 7th and 8th grade. The addition for them for 7th and 8th grade, but they do have to provide their own transportation.
Any questions, comments, the update? As we get ready to close out, does anybody have any other quick inquiry or need for update? Dr. Moffett?
So I helped a family register for, or attempt to register for preschool. And our preschool staff, shout out to the Land of the Littles, they are awesome. However, we did learn that the registration process for registering for schools in general, I guess, is closed. And they were registering for preschool, but you all are switching over from one system to another. And I don't remember hearing about that or seeing that. And so since that particular time, in helping that one family, there have been a few other families that have just been like, this is too tough. I can't register for school. They're being told to wait about a month and then try to register for CPS again. And I'm wondering what the plan is for that, because I didn't see anything on the website saying, hey, families, we're down, our registration system is down. And we are in essence turning families away while we switch systems, and it's not very clear publicly. So can you offer a little insight?
Yeah, actually, there was some confusion around that because that's not the way that we actually see the information. I'm going to ask Mr. Gullohue to come forward and talk through this because he did share that information with me that went through the process. So he'll be able to clarify that as well, because we're still enrolling students. So that's why you haven't heard anything differently, because we are still enrolling students.
Yeah, I think there's just been some confusion in terms of the current system we use is for enrolling and registering students for this year.
Mm-hmm.
The new system begins and is in place for registering students for next year.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case that you described, because we actually looked into that and a couple others we found, we do have messaging leading up to it, how to get assistance. And it actually says at the beginning, do not use this page for registering for next year, go here. But we have had a few people who have gotten through to the point where they've created a situation where they're trying to register next year in the system for this year, and they do ultimately end up with an error.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I do think so. And I actually walked one family through it, and we also took screenshots, and they were able to verify it in the early childhood department because they couldn't replicate it. But there are more than just a few. And also, I guess my question is around the messaging to the public that this is our issue and don't go away. When they call in, they're told, hey, just wait about a month and then try it again. But they actually have accounts, and you all can't see it on your end because we took the screenshot. So my ask is, what is being sent out publicly, either on our page with regard to communications, so that families know that if they are getting this error or where they need to go, because it wasn't clear for the two that I walked through. And then I've had them call customer service and they were just told to wait because they weren't able to get it registered. But we had the screenshots where they had an account, but you all didn't see the account. So.
So if we'll go, it's easiest for us to talk through it from here. So because what Jeremy is sharing is the information that's right here. So if families are enrolling for this year, their online registration form they would click 22, 23, 23, 24. If you'll click there, Rob. And then once you click that information, if they have to set up anything new or set up a new account, this is where they would go from for this. If you'll go back, if they're registering for next school year, then they would have to go here to register for next school year. So, and then they would put their information in here, or they would set to set up after they get their focus account. So in terms of what we're messaging, we're not messaging that you cannot enroll because we still have active enrollment on the site. So we haven't sent anything to anyone or put anything on our website that says that you cannot enroll. What we will do, because the additional information, one was about the form, and then I know that Mr. Gullo, who shared the information back about the form, the other was about the information that's being provided to families when they call into customer care. So we'll follow up with that piece because that's not something that I was aware that was occurring or has occurred. So we can follow up there. I just don't know if there was a lack of clarity as to whether or not they were really trying to register for now or trying to register for next year. So we can go back to the customer care team and clarify that for sure, because we don't want to turn any students away.
Thank you. Well, I've just provided you all the information that it happened not once, not twice, and I showed it to the early childhood, and they saw that, and they verified what I'm saying. So we are having families that cannot get access. They have created accounts, but you all can't see them. I don't know where they are. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention. If it's okay, it's okay. I understand the walkthrough. I walked them through, but there are some families being missed. But thank you for the information.
If you have names, please share.
I sure will. Thank you.
Member Mapp.
Yes, thank you, President Bolton. I just wanted to go back to a comment that Superintendent Wright made, and I just wanted clarification about the summer school piece. You stated that Walnut Hills is still offering programming for 7th and 8th grade. Is that like enrichment programming?
It's not. It's for students that have not. So if their students aren't successful, then they get exited from the program. So every year they have students, they've offered for many years 7th and 8th grade, because that's also some of their largest grade levels that aren't being academically successful. So when we had the conversation at the school level around where the next contention might be, it was around that 7th and 8th grade population. So to remove that from them, and that's been a part of their overall academic program, we didn't think that was prudent.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Any others? I have one real quick thing that's been brought to my attention a couple of times just recently. We made cuts regarding the nurses and nursing. That was a few weeks ago when we made that. And I think I'm unclear, and apparently the community is too, to a certain extent, as to how much we cut and how much we left and whatever's remaining to be implemented. There seems to be some among our partners and among our school communities.
So I can send it in the updates that I'll send today, but we actually cut $1 million from the overall contract. So it's just $1 million change. Now I'm looking again at the document, want to make sure that's accurate. Okay, so in the document that we have, when we go to the choices link,
right,
it shows the $1 million is there. That was the reduction. So the contract last year, I believe, was $5.5 million, I believe was the contract. Is that right? How much? Almost 5.9. So almost $5.9 million was the contract last year. So this year that contract would be close to 4.9.
That's very reassuring, and I hope everybody heard that, because somehow I think that it somehow got out messaged that we cut down to $1 million point something instead of cut 1 point. And I think that's caused great consternation for obvious reasons. So might have to figure out how we get that messaging out, because there was confusion about it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, and we are adjourned, but if the members would please get back to me as to some days that they are available. Our next superintendent, when's our next board meeting is the 29th? Okay, about whether or not people will be here on the 29th, that would be great to know. You just do that casually so we can, I would assume there'll be some voting taking place and what have you, for that day. We could wait till August, you know. We're done, baby doll.